And we should be streaming live.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wiley. All right, so today is September 28, 2021. I am the mayor of the city of Oregon City, and I'm calling the City Commission joint work session with the city of Westland to order. We are going to do a roll call, and Mr. Wiley is going to do the roll call for both Oregon City and the city of Westland.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
I am present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Morrow.
Here.
Mayor Rachel Lau Smith.
Here.
And for the city of Westland, Councilor Todd Jones.
Present.
Councilor Mary Baumgartner.
Present.
Councilor Rory Bylos-Tusky.
Present.
Council President Mayor Rayleigh.
Bill
Rayleigh, excuse me. And Mayor Jules Walters.
Present. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jacob. All right, so we're going to move to citizen comment. Jacob, do you have any citizen comment from Oregon City?
No, nobody registered for this meeting.
And does that cover Westland as well?
Yes.
Jerry, do you know if we had any public comments for this evening?
I'm not aware that we did.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right, thank you. And with that, we will move on in the agenda to the introductory items. When I was talking to the city manager just a few minutes, not too long ago, this may be, at least for the council and commission, maybe a little redundant with roll call. I was like, well, we're about to do a roll call and then we're going to do introductions. So I think everybody just introduce themselves. So Mayor Walters, if you would like any more introduction than that, we can move on to staff and consultant, or if you want to make any comment.
I just want to say thank you very much for joining us in this meeting. It's a pleasure to be here with the Oregon City Commission. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I guess to tag on to that, for anybody who's watching, they may be, why is City of Westland and City of Oregon City getting together? I think you'll find out through this presentations tonight that we have a lot of shared interest. And the City of Oregon City, and talking about particularly a lot of transportation projects, and with ODOT and the I-205 and pedestrian bridges and such, we felt like we needed to learn more about what was happening in the city of Westland and what the future looks like for the city of Westland along the banks of the Willamette River, when we're talking about projects that would touch both of our cities. And I'm sure, I believe that same desire was reciprocated from the city of Westland, of like, you know what, we know about some of the big projects, but it would probably be good to talk a little bit more about the city of Oregon City on our side, or our bank of the Willamette. So with that, our staff worked hard to pick a date a long time in advance so that we could all be together. And so I would agree, it's really good for all of us to be here. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff and consultants. City Manager Conkle, do you want to start out with City of Oregon City?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you, Mayor. Evening, commissioners and councilors. I really appreciate you taking the time to work through this work session tonight. I hope you find it informative. And with that, I'm Tony Conkle. I'm the city manager for the City of Oregon City. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to John Lewis to make the introduction for himself and the remainder of our staff that are here tonight.
Thank you, Tony. Well, we've definitely got Mark Patoric with Kittleson Associates, who I understand is going to present this program from Oregon City. We've also got Dana Webb on and Laura Turway on. Just looking to see if there's anybody else that I might be missing. Laura is our community development director, and Dana Webb is our city engineer, and Mark.
James Graham is our economic development manager. He's on.
Okay, sorry, James. Yes, James is on too. So for Oregon City, those folks will be sharing project elements as Mark leads through that. Mark.
Great. Maybe I'll just turn it over to John, really introduce, or Jerry or John to introduce the Westland staff, and then I'll take it from there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jerry Gabrielatos, the city manager. With us from Westland tonight is John Williams, our deputy city manager, Tim Ramus, our city attorney, and Eric Lees, our assistant city engineer.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We also have a number of attendees from both the consultant team, myself, and Nick Gross, who will be running the slides tonight. And then ODOT staff, I'll have them introduce themselves as we get to that section so you don't forget who they are at that point. But we have Sandra Hikari, Mandy Putney, Ryan Wisheimer, Lucinda, and Alan Hendy. So they'll be speaking here in a few minutes, maybe tens of minutes as we get through these first presentations. But I'll have Nick transition up to our agenda slide, and we'll get things underway and walk you through kind of, this is our first of two nights of a joint work session tonight and then Thursday night. And I'll give an overview of the work sessions both evenings so you have kind of an understanding of where we're going. And then Westland will start and provide some updates on some key projects on their side of the river, followed by Oregon City doing several updates on the other side of the river. And then Oregon Department of Transportation will have updates on several projects that have both interest and implications and benefits within the two cities. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. Next slide. And we can skip through this. This was just some pictures of our counselor and commission. We have Metro is involved in helping out in Clackamas County. I don't believe we have any representatives here tonight, but these are the 4 or 5 agencies that kind of interplay on these various projects. Next slide. So tonight is our joint work session on ongoing and planned transportation projects updates. Many of the presenters here tonight will only be here tonight for these lists of projects. And I know there's a lot of interest and questions that both the commission and council will have. So we'll make sure we provide ample time for that. And then when we return on Thursday, we'll be focused on the Oregon City Westland Pedestrian Bridge, our bicycle and bridge concept plan, and bringing everybody up to speed on that, and then talk about next steps the two communities may collectively take moving forward on that. So we're trying to get all the background tonight and then really focus in on that concept plan on Thursday evening in this 2-day session. Next slide. So day one, starting today, as I mentioned, Westland will start off first, and there's 3 topical areas. First is the Willamette Falls Drive concept plan adoption. Eric will lead with that. And then we have the Waterfront Project in the City Hall Historic District. John will cover that. And then the Willamette Falls Lock update. And John will also cover that as well. We'll pause at that point and then open it up to Q&A questions from both the commission and the council of Oregon City and Westland. And then we'll then proceed with the Oregon City updates. Laura will give the update on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, Dana on the Oregon 99 Shared Use Path Project, James on economic development and tourism, and then on transportation demand management. I believe Laura is going to take the lead on that as well. And again, we'll pause and open it up to questions from the commission and council. So take notes as we go through. All the speakers will be there, and then as you ask your question, just kind of reference the project, and that speaker will address the answer. Hopefully that we can provide tonight. So those are the 2 first sessions. We're hoping to get through those roughly in the next hour. And then we'll move from the city updates, the ODOT updates here on the next slide. And ODOT has 5 topics they'll be briefing on tonight. First is the funding update, and Alan and Mandy will lead with that. And then they will continue into the I-205 Phase 1A construction and give updates on that, including what that is and when it is likely to occur. And then we'll transition. So we'll talk about those 2 projects. We'll stop and have a question and answer on just the project, the kind of the construction element. And then we'll transition and have Lucinda talk about I-205 tolling, give an update on that. I know there's a lot of interest. We'll then stop after that. I know there'll be a lot of questions and comments. So Lucinda will field those. And then Paul Scarlett will give a brief update on the Oregon 43 project. And Ryan, I believe, is going to come in and talk about the 100th anniversary on the historic bridge. And then we have a public comment period built in on this, not any actions going on, but if there is, we have that reserved for that. So that's day 1. And then I'll just jump to day 2 here really quick so you see what's coming down on the bridge concept plan. We'll talk about background on that, the findings and the preferred recommendation from the advisory committee and project management team. I believe the city council and city commission have seen some of this, but just kind of getting this back up to speed, talking about the steps to realizing and getting something actually constructed in the future, and the 5 steps that we would need to go through to get to that. Next steps, and then have discussion. And then a lot of kind of dialogue between the city council and city commission on feedback and the desire to move forward on local adoption hearings on both sides of the river, as we mentioned back in June, and we will talk further on Thursday. A bridge has 2 sides, and this, because it would be amendments to both cities' transportation system plan, we really need to make sure there's some alignment that both cities want to proceed down that path. Because if one doesn't and one does, that doesn't really get us where we need to be. So this is an opportunity for the cities to have a joint discussion up front before proceeding into any potential local adoption hearings. And then we'll talk a little bit about notice and hearing and public comment on that. Again, no actions. These are briefing work sessions, but give the community some time to get into those 2 pieces. So I'll stop there and see if there's any just high-level questions before we jump into Westland's presentation. But any questions from either mayor or council or commission? All right, let's see, Councilor Jones, I see.
Thank you, Mark. This is a really high-level question. You probably shared this with us in an email and I missed it, but will you share this slideshow with us?
Yeah, we'll definitely get the slide deck out. Both staffs have it, and we'll get it to you. Yes. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we'll go to the next slide. And I'll turn it over to Eric at Westland to walk us through the Willamette Falls Drive concept plan. Eric?
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So tonight, appreciate you let me present tonight. Great opportunity to discuss some of Westland's ongoing projects. Tonight, I'll be talking a little bit about the arterial design concept plan. It's a multimodal corridor planning effort to develop continuous bike and ped along Highway 43 and Willamette Falls Drive. And in the essence of time tonight, I'm just going to be giving a short introduction on the Willamette Falls Drive plan. So you see on this map, the project limits are from the Tualatin River into downtown to 16th Street. This portion labeled historic Willamette Falls Drive, that's the current portion that we has been under construction, completed this last year. So this whole corridor was considered a minor arterial, and the majority of the road is just a 2-lane facility with little to no shoulders in areas for bike and ped facilities. Can you flip to the next one? Perfect. So the concept would, so this is just east of the river, Tualatin River, Fields Bridge Park right here. Current state, and then this would be the concept. So we'd have 2 12-foot travel lanes, planter strip, and then the separated bike and sidewalk facilities. Next one. So then skipping over the downtown section that's already completed, we would pick up from 10th down to 6th. And this one's a little bit unusual in that we would maintain, there's already an existing asphalt path down here near the gas station and the shopping plaza. And so we would maintain that. The frontage road, what we call Upper Willamette Falls Drive over here on the right, that would be a shared 2-way bike lane for the cyclist to continue on from the separated path through the downtown area. And then we would, the road would be maintained, widened a little bit, 2 13-foot travel lanes. Next one. Continuing on to the east, we would be more of a multi-use trail concept due to constraints with topography. You see it here on the right. Again, 2 12-foot travel lanes or 13-foot travel lanes, and then the multi-use trail with no sidewalk. And that's mainly due to constraints with the topography. Drops off pretty significant towards the river and then up the hill towards the freeway. Next one. Getting a little bit closer towards where Sunset drops down. Continuing on with the 2-way, let me see, where am I here? Sorry. So this one's a little bit split. We have a sidewalk on the north side and then 2-way cycle track facilities and a 6-foot sidewalk on the south. So it's a little bit of a different concept through this corridor here. And this is Sunset to West A where it comes down. Next. This area here probably has the most significant change. So new road section from West A to I-205, including separated 2-way bike facility, and then a new multi-leg roundabout at Willamette Falls Drive, Sunset, OR 43, and the I-205 intersection. If you flip to the next slide, you'll see the concept. So Mark, if I move my cursor, am I driving? Can you see what I'm moving? Sorry. I suppose I should ask that sooner. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, tell Nick where to point and he can point there for you.
Okay. Nick, if you could show where the existing Willamette Falls Drive goes down from, go back. So where it is existing and then where we're going to take, I just want to show where the existing road goes. Yeah, right there. So now the road would come up here to Sunset Avenue, signalized intersection, correct? And then we would, Sunset would then go on into, drop down the hill to what is Mill Street right away, and then to a roundabout, which would then take you either to Oregon 43 or down across the bridge. So lots to digest there, and John's kind of leading into this next. His presentation will get into the redevelopment of this area with a little bit more detail. So I think some of this alignment will make more sense. And feel free, Mark, to add something if I.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Okay.
And then, like I mentioned, we'll hold questions. We'll let John go through this because it's all kind of ties together on the Westland side. So John, next slide, Nick, and we'll continue.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Eric. Welcome, everyone. I think this meeting is a great idea, and we're really excited to be part of it. You know, Eric talked about sort of the functionality of that road, but I just want to underline the importance of that project. I think, first of all, considering this meeting, that new connection on Willamette Falls Drive for bike and ped is going to be a really important connection between Westland and Oregon City. There's a ton of people in Westland who love going to downtown Oregon City and to make the connections beyond. Obviously, we'll talk about the bike and ped bridge on Thursday night. But just being able to access and connect our two downtowns through Willamette Falls Drive for cyclists and pedestrians, we think is super important, and we're very excited about that. It also has a regional importance through cyclists coming from the north and trying to go south along the I-205 alignment. This is a really important connection. And just for Westland ourselves, making that connection between two parts of our own city is really important, because the topography, as you are very familiar with in Oregon City, it presents quite a barrier for people who aren't in cars. So we're excited about this project. The project's not funded. Maybe we'll hear some magic words from Ryan later that he's going to fund that Willamette Falls Drive work for us. We'll see. But we are hopeful to work with our state and regional partners on funding this project over time. So what you're looking at right now is in red outline, our Waterfront Project area. Some of you have heard us talk about this project for several years now, and really it's been in the works for a number of years. In fact, the potential of this project is one of the reasons I came to Westland 4 years ago. Unfortunately, the last few years being what they've been, we are not as far along as we would have liked on this waterfront planning project. Right when we got it started, the mill closed and then the mill reopened. That was obviously a huge part of visioning for this area. So that kind of set us back for a while. And obviously doing any kind of meaningful public visioning process during COVID has been very difficult. But we are working to put together a vision plan for this entire area. And I think it's pretty unprecedented to be able to plan for more than 2 miles of Willamette riverfront. Really an exciting opportunity. We've broken it up into these 3 districts because we think they have really different existing conditions, really different topographies, and likely really different timelines for development. Probably the earliest area to see some significant changes will be this old City Hall district near the Arch Bridge and our historic City Hall. The property owners there have been involved in a number of projects going on, including the Pedestrian Bridge, the Bike and Ped Bridge. Those owners are seriously looking at redevelopment of the area surrounding our historic City Hall, and we'll be excited to work with them. The timeline is we expect to have a vision plan draft in early 2022 out for community review that would really sort of set the vision for each of these areas. And then we expect to move into the more meat and potatoes kind of zoning work for the historic City Hall district that would allow a project to move forward there. Generally speaking, what we've heard from the community is interest in this area, but a desire to preserve in many ways very similar to what you've heard in Oregon City. Preserve the cultural heritage that goes back thousands of years, preserve the historic heritage of the industrial area here, allow the community access to the river, make transportation easier, and provide access for a number of modes of travel. And we're trying to balance all of that. Eric described the realignment on Willamette Falls Drive that we hope will set the stage for all of those things to start happening in the City Hall district. So in 2022, pandemic willing, we hope to be making a lot of forward progress on the Waterfront Project area. Another thing that I think you can expect to see some work on soon, or results on soon, we hope, is some pedestrian trail connections through this entire area. We do have hopes to make a better connection for pedestrians, even without in advance of the full build out of the Willamette Falls Drive improvements. So this is a pretty exciting opportunity, and we expect to partner quite a bit with Oregon City and with all the partners that you're working on redevelopment at your side as we move forward. We think it makes sense to plan this entire area together. And again, tonight's meeting really sets the stage for that, or continues the work on that. It only makes sense to do this work together and thinking about how people in the region and even from beyond the region will see this area as a whole. So it is exciting. More specifically, moving on to the next slide, in the immediate area of the historic City Hall, as you may know, we are partnering with the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition to bring some life back to our 1936 City Hall, which lies at the approach to the Arch Bridge. This building has been vacant for a number of years, since 2014, and we are partnering with the coalition to turn it into a museum and cultural center. City Council has approved funding for that project out of our 2018 general obligation bond. So the building will be restored to its original look. It will have exhibit space for nonprofit offices, meeting rooms, and can serve as a base for exploration of the area. And we think it'll really signal our commitment to redeveloping this area with both public and private opportunities. Elsewhere in this district, obviously we have the Willamette Falls Paper Company doing some great work, bringing needed jobs back to this area, manufacturing jobs, and doing some really cool work in the area of sustainability, making paper from straw, and keeping that historic paper making operation in this area alive. So that we continue to partner with the paper mill on a variety of projects moving forward. But really, as I mentioned earlier, the next steps are developing a concept plan for this area and moving forward to allow redevelopment to occur, and continuing to work on finding funding for the transportation improvements. Next slide, please. We are going to try to get through our updates pretty fast, and I bet a lot of you know much of what I'm going to say on the locks. The locks is the other key piece of the puzzle down here, opened in 1873, but vacant since 2011 or inoperable. Westland and Oregon City both have been in a leadership role in bringing life back to the locks. We very much appreciate Oregon City's commitment to this project, which has included a financial commitment, which is very important. 2021 was really a huge year for the Willamette Falls locks and forward progress in the effort to repair and reopen the locks. We had big steps forward at the state level and at the federal level. Next slide, please. In the legislature, House Bill 2564 creates a Willamette Falls Locks Authority. This is a public corporation, much like the State Fair or OHSU, basically combines the best elements of public transparency and community value with the nimbleness of a private sector agency. The bill was signed by the governor after the last session, which was a huge step forward for us. The authority will be led by 7 to 11 members appointed by the governor. The Willamette Falls Locks Commission, of which Oregon City is a part of, has the role of recommending appointments to the commission, to the authority, I'm sorry, and the governor should make those appointments by the end of the year. The bill gives the authority broad powers to own and operate the facility, to make repairs, to market it, to enter into a number of financial situations, to fund the operations. Really, the Willamette Falls Locks Authority will be in charge of every practical element of the locks. And the last piece really that the bill did was sunsetting the Willamette Falls Locks Commission. The authority is the successor to the commission. Making recommendations on authority membership will really be the last act of the commission. Next slide, please. So with the structure set up, really the next big piece is finding the funding. And I mentioned 2021 was a really big year. We have done very, very well after many years of work. Multiple efforts at the legislature led to success this year. Senate Bill 5534 provided $7.25 million of lottery bond funding for the operational repairs needed to the locks. Representative Kurt Schrader was able to secure $6.2 million of federal House appropriation funding for the Army Corps of Engineers to do seismic upgrades to the gates and to the walls. That really is a piece of work of statewide and even national interest. The seismic repairs to the gates of the locks protects the entire upper pool of the Willamette River and is hugely important should there be an event. So we have a great start on funding the needed repairs. We're not all the way there. We need to continue working, but the Willamette Falls Locks Authority will be leading that work. We're very optimistic that using the business plan that the commission created, we will be having a lot of great forward momentum to secure the remaining funding and get the locks open and operating within the next 4 to 6 years. That may be an aggressive timeline, but we are very, very hopeful. As I mentioned, both Westland and Oregon City have made commitments to fund the authority during the startup period before operations. That'll be very critical. Many other partners as well. Since ODOT is here tonight, I will say that ODOT has been consistently present in and participating in the work on the locks. Paul Scarlett has been on the commission. We very much appreciate that. And Ryan, I mentioned Willamette Falls Drive earlier. Here's another opportunity. We certainly would not turn down funding from ODOT for this startup phase of the capital repairs. We know you have a lot of other fish to fry though, and we appreciate the partnership that you've given. We do see the locks as part of Oregon's transportation infrastructure and an alternative to highways and a backup in crisis situations. So we do think it's an important part of the network, and ODOT's participation throughout has reflected that. So with that, that's kind of the updates that Eric and I wanted to provide. I will say that we are happy to answer questions now or at any time during the meeting. And I would also encourage our mayor and council to add anything we may have missed or to help us answer questions. Our counselors have been extremely hands-on involved in many of these efforts, which we can't do without them. So with that, that's the Westland update. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Thanks, Eric. How about we open it up Oregon City Commission if you have any questions on the update? Let's see, Mayor Lyle Smith.
Sure, I only have one question about the Willamette Falls Drive concept plan. It seems like that would be quite a lengthy project. I was wondering if you had, although it seems like some of the work has already started, so do you have a timeline for when this project will be implemented?
We really don't. There's no funding currently available, so it's more like I said, we're at 30% design, so it's concept level. So as the plan was to have the design or the concept in place, so as like property along that corridor redevelops, we'll have a plan in place for that redevelopment, but no timeline set.
And so, and none of the work has started really on it.
Other than that, the Main Street project, and that was part of our GO bond from 2018. So there's money there that was from that, the bond project, but none of that is allocated towards the rest of the corridor.
Okay. I guess the only other thing is I just have a comment. As you work on design from a road biker who's ridden Willamette Falls Drive on my road bike, I hope that your outreach is including some folks that actually ride their bike as a road bike person, which is different than a family going out for a stroll with their kids on smaller bikes, because there are safety concerns there, and so I just know kind of I hope that folks are consider realistic expectations, because sometimes I would be concerned of creating the thought for the drivers in the community that all bikers are automatically going to move over to a bike pedestrian pathway if it's created truly multi-use with lots of families and strollers and stuff like that. Generally, road bikers don't want to be combined and mixed with that. And so it's just balancing a narrative and creating a concept that, oh, we created this bike path, and why aren't all the road bikers moving over to the bike path and they're still in the road? So anyway, I just kind of wanted to provide some perspective, because I've ridden it, and I've also tried to ride on multi-use paths as a road biker. So anyway, but thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback.
Let's see, maybe I'll jump over. Any others on Oregon City before we jump back to Westland? Commissioner McGriff?
I have my hand up. Maybe you can't see it against my cabinet. Eric, I had just a clarification. So I couldn't quite get the segment down, but there was one picture you showed that had sort of how it exists now. There's sort of a basalt.
Sunset to West A.
Not a cliff, but yeah. And then on your concept plan, it showed all of that sort of gone. And then the other one that I was noticing is that I can't think of which segment it is, but you know, you come down Willamette Falls Drive, and there's the little building where they sell firewood.
The old bus barn, yeah.
For that, I thought that dropped off quite sharply where the guardrail is, but you have it sort of widened out there. And I said, okay, well, where is that land coming from?
There is several areas where there would be some structural improvements, retaining walls and so forth to widen those sections. Would it be worth flipping back a couple slides, or Mark? Or
if you can get there, I just was curious, because I said, well, I don't think there's any land there, but maybe there is. And I'm
more
obviously driving, and I'm keeping my eyes on the road. I'm not looking over the edge of the
right there.
Yeah, on the picture on the left, there's shrubbery, and then there's a whole bunch of basalt, and then you have kind of like a little grassy knoll there, and that's a lot.
This is, yeah, maybe I'll just jump in really quick, that this is a little bit of deceptive. This is that segment that Eric talked about where Willamette Falls Drive kind of shifts itself. So that is leading to some of this that you see. And then, like Eric had mentioned, there will be a lot of retaining wall on that downhill slope to give the additional widening. But if we go to the next,
so you're talking about where the guardrail is, Mark?
Yeah, there would be a retaining wall. But if we go to the next slide, one more. This is that segment where you have that realignment going. So that basalt, which is right in that area, you're going to have a realignment, and we're kind of seeing that next segment is what we're starting to see as Sunset goes down. So because the road's shifting towards the freeway a little bit and using the old connection, that's where you're seeing a little bit of a different change in those two segments through there.
Okay, I just thought, well,
Yep, fair question.
it just didn't look like the same place.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
One
you.
thing I'll just note on this is this, the city of Westland has gone through and adopted this into their transportation system plan. So very much like what we'll be talking on Thursday, this is a concept plan that gives that roadmap. The other piece is, as ODOT will talk here later, this ties into some of the reconnections that have to occur with the widening of the freeway. So it does set the stage, and as John and Eric alluded to, there's no money. However, we have a roadmap in Westland of at least where we're going in the future, adopted in their transportation plan. All right, maybe Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, Oregon City partners. I'm Todd Jones on the Westland City Council. My day job is I'm a teacher at Westland High School. Hey, if we could go forward a slide. Yeah, that one right there. Thank you. This is partly a response to Mayor Smith's comment about biking, but John Williams talked about pedestrian options along this corridor while we're waiting for and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but the roughly $34 million it's estimated that we'll need to do our Willamette Falls concept from Tualatin River all the way down to Arch Bridge. But while we're searching for the funding for that, we do have an immediate opportunity to help pedestrians along this pathway. And I forget the name of whoever it is that's working the cursor for us.
And Nick can point. Where do you want him to point to?
Thanks, Nick. Have Nick point to what'll be the northwest corner of the largest light green pond.
Right there.
Little more, no, northwest. So go to your left.
The other west.
There you go. So you see a very light color that goes north of the pond there that kind of parallels Willamette Falls, Nick? Yeah, that. If you follow that corridor right there, friends, that's what's going to be a pathway for us in the short term, because we have funding for that right now. We have funding in place to continue what we call Fifth Avenue, to continue along there. And that line, so you know, is the old trolley line from a century ago when workers at the mill traveled to Willamette where they lived. And we're going to follow that trolley line, and we have the funding in place and the plan in place to put that path in about 2/3 of the length. We're hoping that we can get all the way from that corner where Nick had his cursor all the way up to roughly Sunset Avenue. And we have a consultant in place right now. We're having conversations with PGE and Willamette Mill as we speak. So I'm hoping that, golly, within a year, we can break ground on that. And Mayor, this will be a multi-purpose trail, as you said, and being a road biker too, I know what it's like to dodge the strollers, but at least we'll have something in place so that the only option for people isn't to be up on the narrow Willamette Falls Boulevard with little or no shoulder. So while we're waiting for funding for the Willamette Falls concept, we have the money now for that path, and we're looking forward to getting that path in place sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Any other last questions, comments before we move to the Oregon City update? All right, well, hearing none, I'll let Nick advance the slides. And I believe Laura is up first. So Laura, take it away.
Good evening. My name is Laura Turway, and I serve as the Community Development Director for the City of Oregon City. In 2011, the 23-acre Blue Heron paper mill at the edge of Willamette Falls closed, creating an opportunity for Oregon City, Metro, Clackamas County, and the state of Oregon to form a partnership to honor and reimagine the site. Guided by 4 core values, including historic and cultural interpretation, public access, healthy habitat, and economic redevelopment, the Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners worked with the property owner and thousands throughout the region to create a conceptual design for a public riverwalk on a portion of the property. In the summer of 2019, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde purchased the Blue Heron site, and the Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners began working with the property's new owner. This summer, the Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners directed project leaders to restructure and expand the partnership table to include the 5 sovereign tribes which had been engaged in the project: the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, who is also the property owner, and 4 tribes which have designated the Willamette Falls Trust as their representative, including the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Reservation, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. The Willamette Falls Legacy Project began with the vision to transform Oregon City's waterfront at Willamette Falls into a destination that would welcome visitors, spur economic redevelopment, restore native habitats, and invest in sharing the history and culture of the falls. A project of this size and complexity requires building strong relationships to transform the public Riverwalk at the former Blue Heron Paper Mill site into a premier destination. We look forward to seeing the project envisioned by thousands of Oregonians come to fruition. Next slide.
All right, good evening. I'm Dana Webb, the city engineer for the city of Oregon City. I'm going to share with you some information on the OR 99E Shared Use Path project. We prefer to refer to it as the McLaughlin Boulevard Shared Use Path project, but the title in the grant application and award was OR 99E. So in 2000,
having trouble hearing you.
Okay, sorry, I'll try and speak up. In 2005, Oregon City adopted the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan. Since the adoption of the plan, we've completed construction of phases 1 and 2, which includes the area between Clackamas River Bridge to 10th Street, leaving this final phase, which runs from 10th Street to the tunnel. The final phase is also the most complicated to complete as it's interwoven with the McLaughlin Boulevard viaducts, an electrical tower, and the base of the arch bridge. Oregon City received a regional flexible fund grant that allows us to move forward with project development of this final phase. The grant will complete work related to alternatives identification and evaluation, and a 30% concept design for the preferred alignment that includes how to best provide the desired 17-foot sidewalk identified in that 2005 enhancement plan. The goals of the project assist in addressing barriers to investing and revitalizing properties that front and are adjacent to McLaughlin Boulevard in downtown Oregon City. This is accomplished by closing the gap and providing safe pedestrian and bicycle access along McLaughlin Boulevard, as well as providing a complete street on McLaughlin Boulevard. Staff is currently working with ODOT on the intergovernmental agreement that will allow us to begin this project. Next slide. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner, this is what the completed sections of McLaughlin Boulevard from phase 1 looks like, creating a safe sidewalk, landscape medians, and center turn lanes. Next, in the top center, you'll see the existing viaducts along McLaughlin Boulevard. There is a full viaduct from 8th Street to 9th Street in the area behind the courthouse, and a partial viaduct from 10th Street to 9th Street. The upper left corner shows the existing conditions along the corridor with small curb tight sidewalks that have obstructions and are directly adjacent to travel lanes. In this photo, you can also see one of the electrical towers that is a constraint along the corridor. The image on the left shows another view of the corridor, which includes an area on the east side of McLaughlin Boulevard that has no sidewalk or barrier between the travel lane and the private property. Additionally, the image in the lower right again shows the view looking south of a minimal sidewalk directly adjacent to a travel lane. These small sidewalks with no setback from the travel lane do not create a welcoming environment to those visiting downtown Oregon City. Our goal with this grant is to identify the preferred alternative for the corridor and complete 30% concept design. Next slide.
All right, I think James is going to take the lead on this. Let's see, James Graham, are you available?
Sorry, I was on mute.
There you go.
All right, there we go. Good evening, Oregon City Commissioners and Westland Council members. I'm James Graham, Economic Development Manager for Oregon City. And also with me is Ann Griffin, who's also a member of our team. She's the Economic Development Coordinator. If you forgive me, I'm going to be rather brief. So as relates to economic development, one of the best practices in economic development is to have a strategic plan. And we are near completion of our strategic plan. I wanted, however, to highlight two elements of that plan, and that is workforce development. Our workforce development strategy, as you know, even before the pandemic, having skilled labor force was important. Now, after the pandemic, it's even more so vital to have a skilled labor force. So we'll be working with a number of our partners on the state and local level to provide skilled training to individuals between the ages of 18 and 35. The other item in our economic development strategy is business retention and expansion. It is a traditional activity for most economic development organizations. In terms of retention, we'll be visiting a number of our targeted cluster industries around and in the city to help them with any of their concerns and challenges to their own growth. As it relates to expansion, we'll be visiting companies outside of Oregon, outside of the county, to engage companies that very well may see Oregon City as a place for them to continue to grow and to expand. Next slide, please. Our urban renewal plan, the Urban Renewal Commission is currently working on a new vision for the area, as well as a framework for making decisions as we look at projects. And it's important that we vet developers and others who come before us, and I should say the commission, to asking for assistance. So therefore, we will be engaged in a different type of activity than in the past, using a vision that the commission would create, and also a framework for that decision making. Next slide, please. Tourism is a small industry in Oregon City, but it has great potential. And so the city has a tourism strategic plan already in place, and therefore now we're implementing it. And so one of the objectives we have, one of the programs we have is called Destination Ready, which is a 2-year marketing campaign utilizing KATU TV and some other television organizations to promote the assets, historical, cultural, and business assets of the city. You'll see orange and green type banners all over the city that will stand out and let the entire public know that we're open for business. We're welcoming visitors under certain conditions. If COVID continues to be a problem, of course, we expect it to be, but we want to be careful. And then next slide, please. And then the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Arch Bridge. It is Oregon City and ODOT have been working together and planning together, and planning to have a larger group to join both organizations after the summer. So the summer is now passed, and I'm sure that ODOT will have more things to say about this. But it's important that people are engaged in this in celebrating this wonderful, iconic structure. Thank you so much. Next slide.
Thanks, James. Laura will now provide an update on the transportation demand management update.
All right. The adopted Transportation Demand Management Plan describes short-term and long-term actions to manage transportation access and parking to and from downtown Oregon City. The goal of the TDM plan is to accommodate more activity downtown, particularly related to the Willamette Falls development. Within the limited space we have, we're looking to increase access to downtown by transit, biking, and walking, provide and support transportation options, and manage parking resources efficiently. The TDM plan calls for regular data collection to support these goals, including tracking parking utilization and understanding how people are getting to and from downtown. Next slide, please. A working group of stakeholders meets a few times a year to carry out the plan. The working group has some current parking related projects. A parking study this fall will help us understand if changes are needed to parking meter hours, rates, and allocation. We will also be considering the modernization of meters or app-based payment options. In addition, a shared parking program was also established for use of off-street parking lots to support evening and weekend parking. Next slide, please. The working group is also spearheading a bicycle and pedestrian action plan, which includes sidewalk infill projects, safety improvements, and bike parking. In addition, the county, who is also a member of the working group, has started a local shuttle which serves downtown. The working group will soon focus on establishing a wayfinding plan. Much of this work is funded through a grant by Metro's Regional Travel Options Program. The city looks forward to continuing to implement the Transportation Demand Management Plan with the assistance from a variety of stakeholders, such as downtown businesses and residents, Downtown Oregon City Association, TriMet, ODOT, and so many more. Next slide, please.
So I'd like to share an update on the Downtown Oregon City Railroad Quiet Zone. Oregon City has a Union Pacific rail line that runs generally north-south through our downtown, shown as the dotted orange line. Under the Federal Rail Administration's train horn rule, locomotive engineers must sound a train's horn in advance of all public grade crossings. Oregon City has 2 at-grade crossings in our downtown, located at the bottom of Singer Hill and 10th Street near the Dutch Bros, and a pedestrian-only crossing at 11th Street, circled in orange on the map. The train horn rule also provides an opportunity for agencies to mitigate the effects of train horn noise by establishing a quiet zone. In a quiet zone, railroads are directed to cease the routine sounding of train horns when approaching public grade crossings. Localities desiring to establish a quiet zone are first required to mitigate the increased risk caused by the absence of the horn. The city has worked with ODOT Rail, Union Pacific Railroad, Federal Rail Administration to determine the safety improvements needed to establish a quiet zone. Oregon City submitted a community project funding request for our downtown quiet zone to Congressman Schrader. The request has successfully made it into the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Bill, which includes $2 million in funding for the quiet zone. We are currently awaiting congressional approval of the funding package at the federal level. Next slide.
Great. Well, thanks, James, Laura, and Dana for the update on the Oregon City side. Like we did, we'll switch sides and see if Westland City Council has any questions, and then we'll open it up to the Oregon City Commission. See Mayor Walters.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful presentation. So much exciting stuff happening in your city. You've already done such a fantastic job with your Main Street area. I know that so many of us in Westland love to go over there. And now with, what is it, Corner 14 and the Oregon City Brew Company or whatever the name is. I mean, everybody loves to go to that area as well. So you're doing an excellent job. Thank you. And the work at the Falls is very exciting as well. I just wanted to make a comment that we are in the process right now of hiring a business development person ourselves. So I would love to connect our person when they're hired with Mr. Graham to talk about the 100th anniversary of the Arch Bridge and see how we can perhaps partner as both cities to join in that celebration. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Mayor. Any other questions from Westland City Council? Let's see. All right, let's see. Councilor Jones.
Thanks. Councilor Bielostowski had his hand up first. I'll let him go. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Todd. I just wanted to thank the Oregon City staff for all those great presentations. I very much enjoyed them, very informative. I look forward to learning more about each of the different concepts. I just wanted to make a comment, which was that in relation to the traffic demand stuff that your city's doing over in Oregon City, I'm hopeful that the two cities can work together on traffic. Generally, it's always been my opinion that we should form some sort of working group among the two cities for traffic management, just because we're so interconnected with the Willamette Falls Drive Highway 43 going across the bridge, and oftentimes the backups affect both of our cities equally in terms of when there's bad traffic in the afternoon. So just wanted to state my desire to work together down the line on those issues, especially as tolling comes down the pipe, where we might have even more diversion going across that bridge. So thank you, everybody.
Let's see, Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mark. A question for Dana Webb, whether she could back up the no train horn zone about a mile so I can sleep better at night. No, I'm kidding on that one. But I do have a question for Laura. Laura, when you refer to the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, is that referring specifically to the Riverwalk, or is that referring to the entire full development concept that Confederated Tribes Grand Ronde is pursuing?
The Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners are only focused on the Riverwalk, which is only a portion of that land along the waterfront.
Thank you.
Great. Let's see, Commissioner McGriff.
So I will defer to any of my Westland colleagues if they have a question. But I wanted to go back and focus on the 99, well, actually, for me, it's McLaughlin Boulevard in that part. So I love the concept that there's going to be some additional medians. And I want to ask Dana and also ask ODOT, will we be able to further reduce the speed in that particular section? Because when you come under the under the Abernathy Bridge, it's 40, and then it drops down to 30 through our portion where it's already landscaped and we have the sculptures, but that's not what's happening. So I'm hoping we can give the illusion that there's even a more constrained section that people will slow down there because they're just, bombing through there. So is there an opportunity to reduce that speed to match the other part of the corridor?
We can definitely look at that. I think there's also some design elements that we could look at implementing as part of the corridor plan that might assist in making it feel like you want to go slower. So I think we can definitely look at those. I can't promise the speed limit change, but we can work with ODOT on that.
And then the second part of that is, are there any other pedestrian crossing areas besides at 10th and then, at 14th and then at 10th, and then there's one more light that is pedestrian activated that is closer to the bridge. Will that be enhanced as part of this as well, so that makes it a little easier to get back and forth across the street?
Yeah, I think those are all things that we'll really look into. It's taking a plan that's 16 years old and revisiting it with the things we've learned in the past 16 years. So we can look at that for sure.
Okay, so ODOT, or do we have an opportunity for you to take a look at helping us reduce the speed through there?
This is Ryan. I'll speak up for ODOT since I don't know who else is on yet.
Hi, Ryan.
Certainly, thank you. Thanks for the question. And I think I'm going to agree with your staff on that, which is as it starts to get into some level of design is really when we can start answering some of those questions. The good news is in the past, that's really served as sort of this high throughput in a sort of rural type area, whereas now the development that's happened over the course of time helps us use what we call our BUD, which is really taking more of a context sensitive approach to setting speeds. So we're going to have an opportunity to look at that as we work with you and your team on what that design looks like in order to set the appropriate speed. So it's certainly something we can look at. I can't guarantee anything at this point, but I understand your objective and I share it in terms of improving pedestrian accessibility and crossings and safety in addition to traffic through there.
Let's see, any other questions from either commission or council?
Before you do, Councilor Baumgartner and I both had kind of the same question that I asked the deputy engineer. So I'm gonna throw it in Mary's lap since we both had the same idea.
Councilor Baumgartner, are you going to take Commissioner McGriff up on the follow through?
I just wanted to maybe get clarification, although it's back on the section that the Westland staff presented, but maybe I just wasn't understanding the section of road that was being illustrated in that section where there's a basalt wall, because it didn't look like it was a section that could have been leveled out the way it appeared in the second image. But I get that it's a design concept. So,
yeah,
but it's true. We did have the same question.
Yeah. And that's that piece the roadway is actually going to physically shift and realign there with the realignment of Willamette Falls Drive. So that's why you're seeing a section that's then moving. So it's kind of an apple and orange comparison in that graphic that you're seeing.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Smith.
On that same topic, I'm not sure why the other commissioners brought that question up, but that was one of the things in the presentation I questioned as well. And it's only because in Oregon City, if you did anything with a basalt wall, people would go crazy. So that'll be, I would be surprised if people in Westland wouldn't feel the same way about drastically changing the roadway in that way.
All right. Any other questions on the Oregon City update? Mayor Walters.
Yeah, just speaking to Commissioner Smith's comment, I don't believe, or I believe that in the ODOT plan for 205, there is some work on the basalt walls on the Westland side of I-205. But I could ask John or Eric to speak to that if they know more.
And we may segue that ODOT may be able to answer a little bit of that in their upcoming presentation. That might be best, but John or Eric, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I don't have anything off the top of my head. I'd have to look into it and get back.
All right. Okay, not seeing any other questions. I'm going to propose to both mayors that we take a 5-minute break here. I know some people probably haven't got any food to eat, and some people may need to have a little restroom break. So I have 7:12, or maybe we'll give people a full like 7 minutes and reconvene at 7:20, and then ODOT can start at that point. Does that seem fair, mayors? All right, I got a thumbs up there. All right, we'll pause and we'll reconvene here in about 7 to 8 minutes at 7:20 p.m. Thanks. All right, well, welcome back. So everybody got their cup of coffee and is ready to go. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this next section, we got about an hour and 40 minutes. If we need the segment, ODOT has 5 presentations. 2 will start more on kind of funding and construction, and then we'll have a pause and talk about that. Then Lucinda will go on and talk about tolling. And I know that's real important to the community. We'll pause and have another Q&A session at that. And then Paul Scarlett will touch base on Oregon 43, and Ryan will touch base on the 100th year anniversary, and then we'll have any Q&A from that. And with that, I'm going to introduce Ryan Winsheimer, ODOT Region 1 Manager for the Portland Metropolitan Area. So Ryan, I'll let you have some opening remarks, and then we'll move on to Mandy and Alan.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you to both Oregon City and Westland for having us here tonight. And I first wanted to say I really appreciated both of those presentations as well. That's some really great information, really showing the connectivity and how we expect things to develop moving forward, and that's what we want our plans to be tying into as well. And you know, on the Westland side, just thinking about how Highway 43 is also part of that that connectivity element. And I know we've been working closely with staff in working on what does that bike ped connection look like north of the bridge as well, and thinking about multi-use paths and funding there. And you know, I appreciate Mark Williams really hitting up on the funding piece. There is a lot of funding to work through as we move forward, and setting these plans is really the first step in that. So a lot of good work as we think about how to move those forward, both with ODOT funding, some MTIP funding in the future, and hopefully, fingers crossed, for a very large infrastructure funding plan that will help us achieve some of those goals. In addition, I just want to give some special recognition and thanks to Councilor Baumgartner and Commissioner McGriff for really digging in with us on the bike ped bridge work and being those liaisons to both councils. I really appreciated their insights and information that they shared. Really helped inform that process, and I know we're going to get to talk more about that at our next meeting, but I just wanted to make sure to offer some thanks and appreciation for your participation in those processes. We heard pretty clearly as we met with some of your councils that you didn't, that you're having trouble sometimes tracking, as we talked about tolling independently, or we talked about the 205 bridge independently. And so we made a commitment that we would try to make sure we brought everybody to the table at one time so we could have a good comprehensive conversation and answer questions as how those projects relate, they work together, and they help form those connections. So you're going to get to hear from Mandy Putney, who's our I-205 project manager, and Alan Hendy, who's doing some of the construction and engineering piece of that, as well as Lucinda, who's going to give you some information and update on the tolling side. And we have Paul Scarlett to talk about a number of those other projects that are going on. And he may be adding in some information on the 100th anniversary of the Arch Bridge and a little bit of information there. There's not a ton to add right now, but I unfortunately am going to be picking my son up from soccer practice. So, but that conversation will continue. As I think your staff was mentioning, we're already connected. We have some future dates set for that, or I know staff is talking about setting those up to begin those conversations quickly. And I look forward to figuring out how we can work together to make that celebration really something that the community will remember, and hopefully an economic driver as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our project teams to work through some of their presentations tonight. And I will be sticking around for as long as I can to help answer any questions that may come up.
All right, well, we'll pull up the slides, and then Commissioner McGriff, I see your hand up. Did you have a question for Ryan really quick?
No, I just wanted to give Ryan some kudos before we moved on behalf of Councilor Baumgartner and myself. Thank you for helping us with the bridge cleanup. It has continued to stay clean, and I sincerely thank you and your staff, and also the City of Westland staff and the City of Oregon City staff. And we had a lot of fun, and thank you again for helping facilitate that. We really appreciate it.
That was some great teamwork. I appreciate your leadership there. And I appreciate you sending me the article so I could see that in the paper as well. So thank you, Counselor.
Okay. Well, Mandy, Alan, we'll let you take it away, and you can just guide Nick on when you need the next slide.
Great, sounds fantastic. Thanks, Mark. Good evening. I'm Mandy Putney. I work with ODOT's Urban Mobility Office and serve as the I-205 Improvements Project Director. And Alan Hendy will join me tonight. I'll do the first half, and then I'll turn it over to him. He is resident engineer and project manager responsible for bringing the project forward to construction. And then I also work to manage the I-205 toll project, which you will hear much more about when toll program director Lucinda Broussard is talking this evening. I am going to start here just with an overview of the I-205 Improvements Project. As you likely know, we're looking at the 7-mile stretch of I-205 from Stafford Road to Oregon 213. Next slide, please. This is the one section of Interstate 205 that has only 2 lanes in each direction. And that factor plus the interchange configuration adjacent to both sides of the bridge results in a considerable bottleneck in this area. We're experiencing almost 7 hours of congestion a day and a high number of crashes. Collectively, that results in almost $11 million a year in injuries and property damage and delays. In addition, the bridges and the structures in this corridor are not built to modern seismic standards. Next slide, please. With our project, we'll be able to address all of those issues and needs in the corridor. We will end up with an Abernathy Bridge that will be the first interstate earthquake-ready structure over the Willamette River, and also retrofit or replace 8 other bridges in the corridor. Allowing this to be a passable north-south route following a seismic event. We'll see fewer crashes with the interchange improvements and better on and off-ramp connections. And we will see a significant reduction in congestion and travel time, resulting in more reliable travel. Next slide, please. We have long thought about how to construct this project in phases. There are 3 phases to the project, actually. We went out of order, and the third phase has already been completed. That was the real-time traveler information signs that were constructed at the end of 2020. Those signs are shown here with the dark green icons. And then we have phase 1, which will be Oregon 213 to 10th Street, and phase 2 from 10th Street to Stafford Road. We have further subdivided phase 1 as we move forward with design, and are here today to talk mostly about phase 1A, which will be moving forward to construction. That is the green section there, including the Abernathy Bridge and the adjacent interchanges. Next slide, please. Phase 1A is able to move forward due to financing options provided this legislative session in House Bill 3055, which allows us to utilize short-term borrowing. ODOT's short-term borrowing cap was raised with this legislation, and or to use to bond against the $30 million that was provided earlier in House Bill 2017 during the 2017 legislative session. We do ultimately expect that toll revenue will be a payback source for the short-term borrowing, pending the completion of the environmental analysis that's currently underway under the National Environmental Policy Act. The Oregon Transportation Commission approved programming construction funds for $375 million in August into the STIP. And then we went through a corresponding approval process with the Metro committees to move forward and update the MTIP as well. That's the end of the slides that I'm going to do. I'll turn it over to Alan Hendy now, and he'll talk in more detail about phase 1A and what sort of construction will be happening as we move forward.
All right, thanks, Mandy. As Mandy mentioned, I'm Alan Hindy. I'm the resident engineer for the project and trying to work to get this project out into construction next year. So as she mentioned, we're going to focus, the rest of my presentation is going to focus primarily on phase 1A. That's the funded portion that we're going to be moving forward with. The project's moving along well, and I'll talk briefly here about some of the improvements that you all can expect to see with 1A. As we mentioned, as she already mentioned, we're going to be, widening the whole corridor. So this section will include part of that widening. And then obviously the bridge, the Abernathy Bridge structure itself will be seismically upgraded and widened as well to carry 4 lanes across the structure once the remaining phases on the project are done. There was also a sound wall included in this phase that was voted on by the residents of Oregon City. There's a couple of sound walls down in Westland as well on some later phases, but those aren't included in phase 1A. There's also going to be interchange work done on both sides of the bridge on both Oregon 99 and 43. What's shown here kind of in the little pop-out box is the roundabout work that's going to happen at the Oregon 43 interchange. You can see on this picture here that the red traffic movement is the current northbound on-ramp to 205. That on-ramp will be removed, and that traffic movement will utilize the roundabout to get on the freeway. So that was one of the big changes to the traffic patterns throughout the corridor and between the interchanges was trying to get rid of that movement and move it into one sort of entrance point on the freeway. It also indicates on this, I'm noticing that it shows the Broadway Bridge being removed, but that's a further phase. That's another phase of this project that we aren't quite there yet on. So those are some of the details that we're still working out. Next slide, please. So this really talks about some of the interchange improvements. As I mentioned, we'll be putting in a roundabout. We'll also be including multi-use paths along Oregon 43 and Willamette Falls Drive. And we'll be installing a rapid flashing beacon to help facilitate better and safer pedestrian movements across 43 and Willamette Falls Drive as well. On the Oregon City side, on the Oregon 99 side, we'll be realigning and widening some of the on and off ramps. And so by doing, and that's to accommodate some of the widening on the structure as it touches down on the Oregon City side. But we'll also be, while we're doing that work, we'll be including a new multi-use path near Clackamas, kind of along the Clackamas Drive area. Excuse me. And then also including 2 new sidewalks throughout that area as well on the Oregon City side. Next slide, please. So the bridge construction, as I'm sure you all can imagine, is pretty complicated with this structure. It's a very large structure that crosses obviously the Willamette River, and doing this type of widening and seismic retrofit work in a river such as the Willamette is a big challenge. So part of this construction is going to include a lot of in-water work across the Willamette River. That work will be conducted off of temporary work bridges that will be installed. We do have a fish window that we have to work within in order to be able to work in the water, and that's between July and October. Our first season of work, which will be next year, we were able to get an extension to December for the in-water work so that we can try to get some of the temporary work bridges in place. Those are going to be needed to drill the big foundations that will carry the widened structure. Once the foundations and the cross beams are complete, then what you see on the screen here is we'll start working to actually slide the structures themselves out to the outside of the new cross beams. Once those are done and they're both slid, that will provide the necessary space to to construct the widening for the 4 lanes of traffic across the bridge in each direction. I think that's on the next slide. So now once both of those are slid, now we've got the space in the middle, and we'll be also doing the overhang brackets on the outside. So that will widen the bridge enough so that we can have the 4 lanes across, which will be 3 general purpose lanes and then an auxiliary lane in the final configuration. I do want to note there will be an interim configuration when phase 1A is completed, until either phase on both sides of it tie into it. So that's something that we'll be looking to make sure that we stripe, and we'll have sign bridges and signing, and all of that will be in place when we're done with the first phase 1A of this project. You can see down below in the picture, that's kind of just a schematic, a rendition of what the bridge is going to look like. So it's going to be a pretty big structure. Next slide. So some of the expected impacts that we're going to have doing this type of work is going to require some night work. There's just no way around it to be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish on the bridge and within the interchanges themselves. So night work is going to be something that's going to be required. And we do realize that. Part of what we're working on right now is the noise variance request, so that we can try to minimize the disruption to the travelers, to both the travelers, and help increase the safety. That's the reason why we do night work. There are some properties that will be impacted by the night work at the Edgewater and the Cove apartments. We anticipate, looking at kind of where we anticipate the work happening, they're approximately 170 feet away from what some of these noise sources could be happening. Some of the work that we're going to have to, there's just no way to do it without lane closures and night work. It's going to be paving. We expect that to be approximately 2 weeks during each summer and fall, during that 2-year period shown there between 2022 and 2024. With paving operations, it requires paving machines and rollers. The maximum decibels that we expect to encounter during these types of operations are 82, which this is similar to what you experience with a vacuum cleaner. The other element of work that's going to be required to likely have some lane closures and be done at night is going to be when we install that the sound wall. Part of that is, part of the sound wall is going to have to be done or installed on some shafts, and in order to get the equipment in to do that work safely, some of it has to happen at night. We expect that work to happen during the summer, right now during the summer of 2024, and those, that type of equipment will be an excavator and a crane, likely some sort of drill, which is like an auger drill that's used to put in signs or traffic signals, that type of drill, and then concrete trucks. This is, the maximum noise levels we expect from that type of equipment is approximately 84 decibels, which is again similar to a vacuum cleaner being on inside your house. So that is the anticipated noise variance that we're working with Oregon City on. Next slide. This is a map of where that proposed sound wall is, and you can see kind of just north of where the sound wall is where the Edge and Cove or Edgewater and Cove apartments are, that complex there. So. And then the section basically between kind of like Main Street, the Main Street Bridge there, and the Abernathy Bridge itself, that short section is where some of the paving is gonna be occurring. So next slide. So when we look at night work, obviously one of the big things that we try to minimize is what hours that we allow the work to happen at. The main driver behind the hours of work is traffic, and we look at what the traffic numbers look like and when we think we can be out there safely to do the work. So typically most of the work hours are going to be through the nighttime period. If we're talking one lane closure or the shoulder closure, it could be between 6 p.m. and 7 a.m. And then throughout the weekends, it could be between 6 p.m. on a Saturday and 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And so those are typically the hours that we'll put into our contract that will allow the contractor to work. For mitigation, a lot of the equipment that we expect to encounter from the contractor, they do have sound controlled devices, and they are also required to basically have a muffler on their exhaust. So they can't have any, unmuffled exhaust on any of their machines. And that's something that's written into our standard specifications for noise mitigation. The other element of this that we plan on, paying close attention to is our outreach efforts. And we want to make sure that we mail out those that are affected within the area, that, we'll send out some details about when the work's occurring, and we'll provide a 24-hour hotline that they can call in and let us know if we're doing a good job or if we're not doing a good job. We will also have a communication team that will promptly address any of the complaints or concerns that we hear. And then again, we'll be posting all of our night work details and our schedule on the project website as well, so people can go there and get really up-to-date information on what to expect the next week or the following week. So and we'll know, a lot of this is going to be obviously dependent on our contractor schedule and when that's occurring exactly. We don't know all the time yet until we have a contractor on board, but we do plan on working closely with our contractor and developing this outreach plan as we move into construction next summer. Next slide. So this is our overall general project schedule, kind of a high level. As you can see, there's right now we're just getting ready to do our site preparation work, which is shown here on the in the winter of 2021. So that'll actually be done by the winter of 2021. But that includes some of the tree removal work that we expect to be happening within the next couple of weeks. Our design is basically at 100% right now for phase 1A. Most of our right-of-way has been secured, and our utility coordination is well underway, if not complete. And then our permitting is nearly complete as well. Our phase 2 design, you can see, is down on the bottom there. That's been kind of put on the shelf for now. We do anticipate picking that back up this next sometime in 2022 and kind of continuing some of that design work. And then you can see in 2022, we expect the construction to start. It's a 4-year construction project. And so we do, at some point in the spring or the summer of 2022, we will be conducting an open house, inviting the public in so we can share more about the construction details, what they can expect for lane closures and detours, noise, what kind of impacts we're going to have kind of in the river, what they can expect to see in the river. So that will be happening. And then we're hopeful, that based on the funding picture that we'll have phases 1B through 1D kicking off at some point in 2023 as well. And then you can see that down there in 2025, 2026 timeframe is when we do anticipate starting construction on phase 2 at some point.
This is Mandy again. I'll just chime in and offer some appreciation here. All of this work has been done in close coordination with staff from Oregon City and Westland, and we are in regular communication with them and have been having ongoing meetings for months now to really nail down the details to get us ready for construction. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement, and an appreciation for the time and the effort that they have put forward to help us with all of these pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Yeah, we couldn't have made it to the point where we're at without our weekly meetings and get-togethers with Oregon City and Westland. It's been really great working with them. So, is that I don't remember. Is that our last slide?
I think you made it.
All right.
Yep.
So thanks, Mandy and Alan. We'll open up to questions. I know there's a lot of interest on this set. If we don't have to use all the time, we won't, but we'll let this Q&A go until 8 because I want to definitely reserve time for the tolling, which I know there's more questions about, but we'll open it up. And I see Commissioner Smith followed by Mayor Lyle Smith. So Commissioner Smith.
If you could go back to the slide with the sound wall, please, that would be helpful for 2 questions. First question is, as you see, Main Street goes under 205 in that location. On the northern part of Main Street, there's 2 finished sidewalks. Will both finished sidewalks connect to finished sidewalks on the south side?
Eventually, yes, they will, but during phase 1A, they will. I don't believe that those connections are going to be made during phase 1A.
Why not?
Well, we've been working with the city staff on part of this, and I think that we do have some sidewalk connections that come up Main Street, and I'll have to look into and I was actually doing this before the meeting and couldn't find it. But I don't have a good answer for you at this point right now.
That's a staff question, our staff question.
What's that?
That's an our staff question, meaning the information based on that decision was from our staff.
Yeah, we've been working with your staff. Your Oregon City. We've been working with Oregon City staff.
Okay, so our staff listening, I would like to have an answer to that question.
Maybe I can take it on real quick. So the city staff requirement for the project has been reviewed. They phased this out a little bit later in our review. Our first review required sidewalk connections along Main Street on both sides of Main Street between where they exist in front of the Cove Apartments to where they'll end at 17th on one side, and I think they go to the
18th on the other.
Yeah, to the other side. So the project includes a requirement for those connections. The phasing came later, and as we're understanding it now, the sidewalk work along Main Street extension is included in phase 1B. And timeline for 1B, I guess I'll leave to Alan, but our understanding is these projects are going to be bid in various phases, but and they make sense to do it later because there's a fair amount of utility work in Main Street extension. But it's been my understanding that we're probably not going to see a lot of delay between the 2 phases.
The current schedule is that the contracts would overlap with each other.
Yeah, that's correct. You're correct. Both of you are correct, Mandy and John. So with the 1B element of the project, we do anticipate that hopefully starting in 2023, which will be that element of work is finishing everything up to 213 on 205 itself. Part of that work includes the bridge, some of the bridge widening that's going to be happening on Main Street itself. That widening will, as John mentioned, there's some utility work within Main Street and some widening work for the interstate itself that impacts Main Street. And so that was the main reason why they weren't extended down in phase 1A. We do have some work down at Highway 99 that will be working on some of the sidewalks and the ramps down in that location. But that little gap, and as John mentioned, the timing between phase 1A and phase 1B, as far as completion dates, is going to be very similar. And so you really won't see much of a delay in that work being done. But it's not included as part of this 1A portion. That's
okay. So the sidewalks are part of 1B, And that will be extended on both sides of Main Street to the existing sidewalks on the other side.
Correct.
And that's in time lane in terms of 1B is how many years?
We are anticipating, and again, this is all based off of funding, but we're anticipating 2023 would be starting construction on some portion of 1B.
Okay. That connection is absolutely crucial. So I think, you know.
And we did hear that. We absolutely did hear that from your staff. But as far as the timing goes, that was something we were trying to work out is, you know, could we do it? Could we not do it?
Okay. The only other question is, I assume as development occurs in the Cove, there may be future conversations about an extension of the sound wall in future phases. Would that be correct?
Not as part of this project.
Not any of the phases.
Well, as of right now, the sound wall is tied to our NEPA document, and our NEPA document for this is complete. And it's also tied to when developers come in for actual like an actual application with, you know,
right,
and that being approved. And so that was kind of why this sound wall was added so late in the game, was because we were hopeful that we could get, because we were obviously advised that there was the potential for that happening.
Okay,
that didn't happen. A future development, another development just to the north there.
Right.
And so we were kind of waiting for that decision to be made, but right now our NEPA is complete. And so it was not included. That element was not included. So
if and when another development happens there, what is the process then for a sound wall there?
Well, that's a great question. We do have like a sound wall office and sound wall, you know, policy at ODOT. I don't know what that is off the top of my head.
I mean, I can jump in here a little bit, and you know, maybe Paul or Ryan want to add too. But if ODOT is doing work, then we do analysis about sound walls. If development comes in and there isn't a project plan,
not your problem.
Not that it's not our problem, but I mean, you know, then there already is the infrastructure there, and so then, you know, there could be a conversation with the developer about what they might desire.
All right. I know there's a lot of questions, so maybe we'll move on to Commissioner or Mayor Lyle Smith.
Sure. I'll make mine quick. So I have two small questions. So does ODOT actually test actual noise while the project construction is going on, like at night, to see whether or not you're within what your projected noise decibels are?
That's something we can certainly do. I mean, it's not out of the question to do that during the start of a night operation to see what that is. But it's not something that we require our contractor to do.
Okay, so maybe only if you receive complaints, you might here and check it. I'm just wondering, because if you're going to be asking us for a noise variance on a specific, decibel levels, I'm just wondering, is there ever any follow-up or any checks as part of that, just to kind of check in and say, or is that on us, or I just want to check on that. Then my second question is, I know I'm receiving project emails. Do you expect to have an email list for folks who want to receive project updates, particularly thinking of the neighborhood association there? We want to make sure that they're staying in the loop of project updates. I assume that they may be signed up or not, but is there going to be a new email list, or maybe it's an existing one?
We'll use the existing email list, and we've been growing the list for 4 years, and are in regular contact with the neighborhood groups. So we're always happy, if you want us to check to see if someone's on there, we always can do that, but we would just keep building from our existing list.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
All right, Councilor Aurelio.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the wonderful presentation and for the opportunity to comment. I noticed that in your presentation, you talked about the number of accidents in this particular section of the corridor. And my concern is that with these large construction projects, we typically see even more reckless driving by the general public, and even with the trucking industry, a lack of recognition of the posted speed limits to slow down in these work zones. So I'm wondering if ODOT is considering, given that we just put in all these expensive sign bridges, doing some kind of video surveillance measures at some point in the future so that we can assist the state law enforcement agencies with dealing with reckless drivers and issuing video citations. And I know we also have this tolling project that's coming up. And so there's another opportunity there to perhaps add some additional law enforcement measures to control these speeds and safe driving conditions on our interstates. And then if we end up being short of video surveillance capabilities in the short term, I'm wondering how the city of West Linn can use its police force to partner with ODOT to help control the traffic during this construction project.
Alan, do you want to answer that
Yeah.
one in terms of speed and safety during
Yeah, that is
construction?
timely question because I just met with our OSP sergeant in charge of this area this morning. So we've been I can't speak to what the legality is of doing video surveillance. That's definitely not within my wheelhouse. But what I can tell you is that we're working with OSP right now, and we're going to be engaging Westland PD as well as Oregon City PD to help with traffic control assistance and work zone enforcement. And so we do this as a project, and we set aside a bucket of money and with a certain amount of hours that we anticipate for overtime shifts for both, OSP troopers and the local PDs. And so we met today with the sergeant, and they said that they have the capacity to help us. Right now, we're anticipating a certain amount of hours per month, and we're going to be reaching out and having the same conversation with West Linn PD and Oregon City PD to help support on both sides with interchanges. So that's how we anticipate to help control the speeds during construction. We also will have reduced speeds through this construction zone during the project. And so hopefully that will help as well. That coupled with the enforcement and the presence, typically we see positive results. And we've got them, we'll have that for the 4 years of the project. So if we start to see an uptick in, speeding or accidents, we can make sure to, that they'll get out there and do some more enforcement for us.
I think Ryan would like to chime in here too.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. And that's just to say that we do not have authority to use sort of the video camera technique that you described, but we do have authority to do photo enforcement in our work zones. And so that is something that the team can continue to explore in partnership with both OSP and with your local law enforcement. We have done it in the past on a sort of pilot basis with Portland Police Bureau. And what we've been running into in terms of trying to move that forward has been law enforcement participation, because we have to have law enforcement there actually on site doing it. So that is something we can explore. Thanks for bringing it up. And Alan, that's something I can connect you with our folks who have done some of that work in the past and how we might incorporate that into some of the work zone areas on this project. That's a great idea. Thank you.
All right. Well, maybe we'll do one more question with Commissioner or Councilor Baumgartner.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the information. I also appreciated having access to this ahead of time because that helped me. And I will point out that anybody who is interested, I went through the process of signing up, and there's a lot of really helpful additional information that people, if like you were talking about neighborhood associations, might wish to go through and just sign up for themselves, and they can customize what the information they'll be getting. So I thought that was really helpful. My question is actually about the in-water work. I'm wondering what types of fish were focused on as far as the potential impacts. I know obviously salmon, but I was wondering if sturgeons, different breeding seasons and cycles were taken into consideration also.
So that's a great question. As far as I'm aware of, is from the in-water work period, it's for the listed species that are, that are on the ESA list. Which includes salmon, and I'm not a biologist, and I definitely couldn't quote what's in our permits, but that's my understanding, is that it has to do with salmon. Now, obviously, we're very concerned with, and we'll be monitoring other, because there's sea lions, which are considered marine mammals. Those are in there as well. So we have some provisions for some monitoring during construction activities for that. The other large area of concern is the migratory bird nesting window. And so that has to do with, all the vegetation that's around the river and, where they nest along the shores and in the trees. And so, and those, so we're trying to balance all of those work windows. So from an in-water work period, right now, I think it's just focused on salmon, and all of our mitigation efforts that will be happening in the water during that work period are going to be geared towards protecting the salmon. And that's why we can't, we can only do the work between July and October. Outside of that window, we can't do any of the in-water work.
Is there any, thank you. Is there any place I could go to look up this this particular, the list of species that were considered for impacts and what have you? Is there a list somewhere or access to that?
We have the categorical exclusion documentation, which is our NEPA documentation on the project website. I can send you a link to that. It has an overview of all of the disciplines, including water quality and ESA species. And then I'm happy to provide you with like the technical reports that go along with all of those if you really want to dig into the details. We don't have those posted online because most people don't tend to want them, but I'll send you what we do have, and then just let me know how much more information you'd like.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. Well, thanks, Mandy and Alan. I think we'll at least pause the questions for now. And I think Alan and Mandy are going to hang on, but I think we'll turn it over to Lucinda to talk about tolling. So welcome, Lucinda, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Again, Lucinda Broussard, Toll Program Director. If you can go to the next slide. So Toll Program is part of the Urban Mobility Office. We're a new office. We started January 2020. These are kind of, I call them our 5 pillars. You'll see these run through all our projects and programs. It's part of the Toll Program also, talking about equity and safety, climate change, addressing that, congestion and reliable funding. So congestion management and also reliable funding. Next slide, please. Here are the core projects for the UMO, and the UMO is really the Urban Mobility Office. I'm sorry, we call it the UMO affectionately, is really a centralized place to do major projects and kind of do them a little bit differently, in which case, we're trying to make sure that we get in all programs. We have an Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. There are other things that we're doing that's a little bit different, but really trying to get big things done. And as you can see there, I'm going to start at the top where the Interstate Bridge is. So Nick, can you follow me down the I-5? Thank you. Interstate Bridge. We also have the Rose Quarter, which is another core project. 217 auxiliary lanes. Thank you. I-5 Boone Bridge, all the way at the bottom down south. And then the I-205 project, which Mandy and Alan just spoke about. Those are our core projects. And as you can see that what is going on those projects, the other things that come with it, the seismic retrofit, congestion management, we have all the icons that go with those projects. And then if you see that dark blue line, navy blue, dark blue, that is our regional mobility pricing project. So that's our congestion management for the metro region. And it starts at the Interstate Bridge, goes all the way down to the Boone Bridge and goes from the connection of I-5, I-205, all the way up to the Glen Jackson. And then the I-205 toll project, part of the improvements project. Next slide, please. How will it work? It's all electronic. All electronic means there's no stopping. You can continue to drive at highway speeds. We'll capture that information either through a transponder, sometimes called a tag, sometimes called a pass, which is connected to an account, or capture your license plate and send an invoice through the mail. Next slide, please. How much will it cost? Always a question. We won't know that now, but you will know when you get on the road before you travel. So we won't know the cost now because that's something that the Transportation Commission does, and that usually happens about 6 months before we go live. But we are doing variable rate tolls, which means it's higher during the peak and less during off-peak. Next slide, please. What will it pay for? We talked about those core projects. I do want to make sure that we remember there was a policy September 2020 by the Oregon Transportation Commission that says tolls collected on a corridor stay on that corridor. So we'd be paying for those core improvement projects on that corridor. Transit and multimodal transportation options, ones that are identified. We do have a transit multimodal working group, which is regional, includes TriMet, C-Smart, C-Tran, SMART, and some of the smaller ones, and also multimodal. So we're talking about rideshare, and there is one more on there. Can't think of it right now, but we do. It's kind of like bring it all together because we don't do transit, but we do transportation. So bringing them to the table, talking about what the needs are. Our transit multimodal group has actually mapped out what the transit is now in the area and then what it needs to be in the future. Neighborhood health and safety, and that includes getting to things in your neighborhood, getting to the hospital, but also diversion and safety. So it's looking at both of those things. And then we talk about affordable options for people experiencing low income. House Bill 3055 has a measure in there to talk about experience for people experiencing low income to provide some kind of discount or credit. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Equity Mobility Advisory Committee, which also took this into account. I can stop here and take some questions and then continue. Can we do that?
Yeah, how about we'll take the two by Mayor Walters and then Councilor Bialaski. And let's do that. I know some of these questions might get answered further, but let's take these two really quick and then we'll move on. Mayor?
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Broussard. And I'm sure you know what I'm going to ask because I ask it every time we have this presentation. But I know there's 5 tolling gantries planned in this corridor, and 4 of the 5 are in Westland, or at least perhaps are going to be in Westland. Do we have any more definitive idea of where they are? And if so, can we spread them out around the region so that Westland isn't disproportionately impacted?
So right now we haven't decided where the toll gantries are. I think we're just looking right now at the Abernathy Bridge, Tualatin Bridge, where those may be, and that's only 2. So right now, no, don't know.
Okay.
We're not there yet. That's going to come in a few more years, but we're not there yet. But we'll bring that back before we do anything.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up, if no one minds, is part of HB 3055 talked about diversion, which is something that we're already impacted by in a very negative way. And it talks about helping to mitigate diversion on highways, I think is a term that's actually used in the bill. And I'm not sure if that really covers where our diversion is happening, which is on roads like Stafford and and Borland and Eck Road and Willamette Falls Drive. So do you know if ODOT has some plans to mitigate diversion in Westland?
And I want to say there's some slides coming, but let me
good.
just say that we'll be looking at 50 intersections. You know, we've come around and we've asked, can you give us your like hot spots? We'll have those. We're like looking at about 50 intersections. We will then talk about what the impacts are, and then what the mitigation could be.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Sure, not a problem.
All right, let's see. We'll go quickly to Councilor Bialowski.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Ms. Broussard, for your helpful information and presentation. One of my questions was the same as Mayor Walter, so I look forward to hearing more about the diversion policy. But I also wanted to ask, I think a lot of folks are concerned about tolling generally, but they're also concerned about kind of Westland and Westland's tax dollars from driving on the road being used for projects that are outside of our areas. And I note that you mentioned the policy that the OTC passed to make sure that the money stays on this corridor, that's collected on the corridor. But I wonder, once this project is completed, the OR 213 and to Stafford Road improvements, are there any plans to stop the tolling, or will that commitment to keep the money in the corridor continue beyond the project time? Or will at some point people who pay the tolls in the Westland Stafford area, will that money be used to finance other state transportation projects down the line? I'd wonder if that policy is in perpetuity, or if that could change.
Don't know what that policy is. That's something the Oregon Transportation Commission will set up if tolls come off once something is paid off, or if they continue into in perpetuity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, listen, let's keep going. I know you got a lot of good content here, so we'll hold questions so you to get through this, and then we'll open back up the floor.
So when will it start? As you heard from Mandy and Alan, they are planning on having the bridge done in 25, and we will toll somewhere between the end of 24, early 25 on the I-205 project. I talked about the regional mobility pricing project, which was that dark blue line going from IBR or Interstate Bridge replacement all the way down to Boone Bridge, and then the intersection of I-5, I-205 all the way up to Glen Jackson. We're in a pre-NEPA now. I think we've been coming around talking to folks about giving us your comments on our purpose and need statement. We're hoping to start the official environmental review in 2022. I'm looking to finish that in 2024. That will require that the federal, literally the US DOT secretary sign off on it. So we have some time in there. Tolls won't start there till 25, 26. Because it won't be done probably until then. And then I talked a little bit about the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. I think there's a slide about it, but their work will continue through these NEPAs. They've started already. They've been working on the I-205 project, and they are coming up with recommendations. They report directly to the Oregon Transportation Commission. So that work will continue throughout both of these projects, the I-205 and the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. And then public input, as you know, we're everywhere talking all the time, and we'll continue to do that to community stakeholders. And when we say travelers, that will continue through operations. So that's why that arrow keeps going. Next slide, please. Next one. Thanks. As I mentioned, the Regional Mobility Pricing Project has the same pillars as the UMO or the Urban Mobility Office, and we carry those through this project also. Next slide. And I did mention we are asking about our purpose and need. It's in draft right now, but we're looking, information about our purpose and need statement. We're also looking for goals and alternatives and doing our analysis on that first part. how can you get involved, or how do you want to hear from us? I think that works both ways. Here are some ways to get involved, but we also would love to hear how you'd love us to get involved, how you want to communicate with us. But you can sign up for the newsletter, which you can do on I-205, the project, the toll project, all available. And we're planning on some regional fall workshops, so you should see some information about that and invitations coming out soon. Next slide, please. I-205 toll project, Abernathy Bridge in Tualatin, same 5 pillars. Next slide. How can you get involved, and what are we looking at doing right now? We're talking about that analysis, so it's kind of good when we're talking about the diversion, what that looks like. So we're looking at those impacts right now. I think I have a couple of slides that kind of blow it out to the horizon years. But same way to get involved with us. If you want to do our newsletter, that works out. We're also doing this outreach. And we can, we have some continuation. We want to keep the conversation going. I want to say that for the toll program itself, we also have the regional mobility, the Region 1 Act Plus, the toll working group. So we've kind of added that. It's every other month, and we're just talking tolls there. So that's another way to get involved, or to have another avenue to talk just about tolls. Next slide. Here are the 2 places for potential toll gantry. So there's the 2 that we're talking about. One Abernathy, one Tualatin. Next slide, please. We were talking about diversion. So these, we see, this is in 2045. So it's kind of, this is our furthest out, and what we're trying to find out are what are our impacts. If we put on tolls, what do the impacts look like? So it looks like a decrease is where you see the blue, not circles, not squares, but yeah. Where you see the blue is where we see decrease. Thank you, and one more, Stafford Road. And this is in 2045. So our horizon years are 2021 through 2025. 2045 is what we're looking at. What's the change between now and then? Build, no build. If we build a project versus if we don't. Next slide. This is 2045. And you can see it switches where the impacts are. So the increases are different. And this is the build scenario. This is the no build scenario. If we do nothing, things just keep growing. And that's because population is growing. We can't stop. I keep saying we're kind of doing the vertical versus the horizontal. Horizontal would be add more lanes and just continue to build. Vertical is what can we do and what can we add on top of it? So you're talking, we're going to widen, then we're going to add pricing, then we're going to, we have ramp metering, and we're trying to go up versus go out. But population is going to increase, and trying to deal with it. We're trying to deal with it through pricing. And this is a future look. So we're trying to solve the problem for tomorrow today. Next slide, please. Public engagement, we're doing that now between September and February, and I think you've seen us out here before, so I would say that we continue that, but we will continue and in earnest go through this 21 through September through February. Next slide. TPAC, JPAC, we're planning on bringing an amendment for the RTP, which we need to update for the I-205 improvements to add the toll piece to that. Mandy, can I get you to, Mandy, are you still there? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm still here.
Can you talk a little bit about the RTP update?
Sure. So the RTP is the Regional Transportation Plan. It was updated in 2018. It currently describes the 205 Improvements project as unfunded for construction. So we'd like to update that narrative in the Regional Transportation Plan. And we also would like to add the I-205 toll project, both to the metropolitan, the metro tip, the transportation improvement plan. And in order to do that, we have to add it to the fiscally constrained list on the regional transportation plan. So this will all allow us to move forward with funding programmed in the correct ways, which Federal Highways really likes us to do, and will help us make the financial connection between tolling and the capital improvements.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So the I-205, we are in a environmental assessment right now. We believe that we'll be done with that by the end of next year. That modeling and analysis, that piece that we're talking about now, we have at least identified areas that we're working with now. So as I mentioned, we had 50 intersections that we've identified. Those we will start doing the analysis on, figuring out what the impacts are, talking about what the mitigation is, and then going forward. So next slide, please. Oh, we're done. You can contact us at OregonTolling.org or follow us at Urb Mobility Off. Thank you so much. I tried to leave a lot of time for discussion because I figured there'd be a lot. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Lucinda. For this, we're at about 8:20. I was going to let Q&A on this go until about 8:40. We still have the Highway 43 update and stuff. So with that, let's see. Councilor Raylia, is that your earlier hand or a new hand?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I do not have my hand raised at this point.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll go to Councilor Baumgardner, followed by Commissioner McGriff.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this information. I have a question that I can't help but ask, which is there any possibility that the tolling won't go into this section of 205? Or are other corridors being considered? And I will add to that question the fact that this particular stretch of state highway has such an close parallel alternative surface street that cannot handle the diversion traffic that's already, it's an ingrained habit that people are already doing. It's a behavior that's already happening and will only get worse, and there isn't the infrastructure on this road to accommodate it.
Thank you for that question. We will be tolling the Abernathy and the Tualatin, and the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. We will toll all of I-5 down to the Boone Bridge and all of I-205, which really leaves little place to do the diversion. They're right now diverting to get around those congestion pieces and get around like one piece. This would toll everything. So there's really not a place you can get off of, not unless you're making a short trip, which you should, not be using that highway for anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Commissioner McGriff and then Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and thank you for the information. If John Lewis is still on the call, he'd probably have to jog my memory, but several months ago, the City of Oregon City joined with several other communities, including Tualatin and Westland and Happy Valley up and down the corridor, and sent in letters basically expressing concerns about the tolling. And I presume that what your answer will be, and let me be a little forward on that, is that this study is going to try to answer those questions. I think our letter was something like 6 to 7 pages long. And I recall seeing that about a year ago, and it was sent in to ODOT expressing concern, asking a lot of questions. And since you hadn't started it yet, I presume that's going to be forthcoming, the response.
So I think I remember part of the letter, and part of it was about tolling I-5, not just tolling the I-205 corridor that we had picked, which was the 7-mile stretch. We did respond to that letter actually, and one of the things we did was open that up to do this regional mobility pricing project. So those letters that we received from those communities along the I-205 corridor did help us in stretching out the project and talking about congestion management as a total program versus just projects.
Great. Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell, followed by Commissioner Murray.
A couple of comments. I think Councilwoman Baumgartner is right. I mean, the opportunity to divert onto Willamette to avoid the tolls is going to be way too tempting. But the main reason I asked to speak is I'm concerned about the variable rate tolling program. I've seen some specials on them and how prohibitive those rates can be at peak hours, and how in effect it's a regressive tax that impacts those least likely or least capable of paying the rates they may encounter. And that those programs, I presume everything I've seen says they're usually outsourced to specific companies that excel in them, one of which was an Australian company. So all in all, I'm just expressing my concern about a variable rate tolling program. Thanks.
You're welcome. Let me just comment on that. So that Australian company, Macquarie, I believe is the name, does a lot of that work. We're talking about, there are two things there. So Macquarie is part of I believe they're Australian, but they're like part of the retirement program in Australia. And what they do is they buy lanes or they rent them, and then they can increase tolls whenever they want. We're not looking at doing that. We are doing this work as part of ODOT. And then you mentioned about the toll going up. We're doing variable rate tolling, but let me just kind of qualify it. So variable rate tolling means that it'll go up during peak and down during off peak, but it will be a known toll rate. So it's not going to be, what you'll hear is something called dynamic, which means it's changing as you go, right? So you can start in the morning and look and see it says, I used to work in Atlanta, so I can tell you a true story. You can leave your house and it's like $1.20 and get there and it's $15.65. So, I mean, between your time leaving home and getting to the road, it could be that much. We're not doing dynamic pricing. We are doing variable rate, but it's known rate. So we will be posting those rates. They'll be online. You can check them on your mobile phone. So it will not be the skyrocketing rates that you may see in the DC area. I think their highest rate was almost $47 for one trip. Yeah, so no, we're not planning on doing that at all.
Well, there's some comfort in that answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Commissioner Murray.
Thank you, and good to see you, Ms. Broussard. Thank you for that presentation. My first concern is very similar to what Councilor Bialostowski said earlier about, I didn't realize that the OTC had made that decision about keeping the dollars in that stretch. And so I'm confused and concerned about how we're going to maintain that, given that phase 2, I think you said it was supposed to be over around 2027 or something like that. And that the toll as it is right now is indefinite. The 205 toll fact sheet that you guys gave us says in the heading, the I-205 toll project is needed to complete the I-205 improvements project. And that's true, but I also think that you guys are leaving out some important parts, like this is going to be indefinite. And when I was at the farmer's market on Saturday talking to one of your representatives, we were talking about how there's this disconnect with the citizens and how people aren't really understanding the needs or the purposes. And I think that heading right there is one of the big reasons, is because there are some, it feels like strategic omissions of what the goals and the plans are here. So that's one of my big concerns here, is communications with citizens so that we're actually aware of what the idea and the plans are here. And I think that's just disingenuous. And then I'm also confused by, it feels like you guys are kind of slapping on these feel-good words to make it feel better for us. So like the climate change thing, I think that's great, but I'm also, we're trying to do the congestion pricing, but we're also adding lanes. So I'm confused, and I'm in favor of adding lanes, but I think that's counterintuitive to a lot of people. And then when we talk about equity, I think we're just throwing that word around so much without actually explaining what it means. And I'm happy to see that you guys are doing the great work of having those regular meetings. But as Commissioner O'Donnell said, this is going to disproportionately impact members of our community, especially now heading out of the pandemic, hopefully, who are not going to be able to stay at their white collar or work from home remote jobs that we're getting used to right now. And then lastly, I'm concerned about the financing here. So do we have an estimate right now about what the price tag for the phase 1A is going to look like?
Mandy?
Sure, yes. Hi. Currently we programmed construction funds for $375 million for phase 1A.
Thank you. Are there any statutory update financing things that are in the statute, in the bills, to take a look at where we are keeping on track with that? Because I know following the Rose Quarter project, how that project has more than doubled in how much they were expecting to pay, with some things that seem pretty common sense, like implementing the inflation rates. I'm just curious how confident you are about that rate, and if there are any times you guys are going to go back and see if it needs to be adjusted.
We have done a series of cost risk assessment workshops and value engineering workshops as the project has been developed. As you heard during the presentation, that section of the project is now at 100% design, which means that we have a high level of understanding of the conditions to build the project in, and the constructability and the different methods to use. We've done a lot of outreach with industry and contractors to make sure that what we're planning is buildable. So our next step is to go out to bid for the contract. And we're using an alternative procurement method that will allow us, it's a multi-parameter best value method that allows us to score the technical approach and qualifications, and then score separately the cost element of it. And then we look at both together to end up with a contractor that provides the best value. So once we have the bids in hand, we will be able to compare the bids to the programmed funds. And if there needs to be an adjustment, that will go through public conversation through the Transportation Commission.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Lucinda on tolling before we move on? Mayor Lyle Smith.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Broussard. It's good to see you again.
You too.
So the regional mobility pricing program, do you have a timeline on when you think the rest of 205 and the portions of I-5 will have tolling implemented?
That will complete. We're hoping to have that NEPA done and the federal government sign it in 24. And it would be sometime 25, 26 before we'd have tolls on.
Okay. I feel like that piece is maybe missing from the conversation, or maybe it has been up until now. Like we're all so focused on I-205, rightfully so. It's in our backyard where we use it all the time. But I think that piece of the conversation, I feel like maybe it's new, and maybe that's why it hasn't been out there too much. And the messaging keeps changing, with new policies being passed. And I know, we've had teams advocating for using the dollars in our own particular areas and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of work that's been happening on this. So I just think that piece of the narrative would be good to start getting that information out too, as far as at least making it, I mean, if we're going to have to deal with it, I feel like it would make us feel a little bit better knowing that everybody else is going to also be told, and you're not just like pinpointing Oregon City and Westland, and that we're bearing the brunt for everybody else. We want everybody else to buy into improvements, and it's not just us. So that may help in some of the messaging. I hadn't heard a timeline on that, so I think that would be welcome news. At the same time, they're having to still deal with the tolling.
Thank you.
Great. All right, well, we'll move forward. Lucinda will stay here, but we'll go through and transition to Oregon 43. Just a little backdrop before Paul presents on this. Oregon City it's been about 3 or 4 years ago, adopted the Oregon 43 concept plan. So similar to what Eric mentioned earlier today on the Willamette Falls Drive concept plan. And then what we'll talk about Thursday is kind of laying that blueprint into their adopted transportation system plan. And Paul is going to give an update on the first phase of design and construction on that. So Paul, you want to take it from there?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Paul Scarlett, Area Manager, Metro East for Region 1. I actually been with ODOT for almost 4 years, and one of the first projects I inherited was this project. It's been in the works for a long time. It is a coordination between us and Westland, us being ODOT, to construct, first to design and ultimately construct a safe and modern bicycle and pedestrian facility along Oregon 43, also known as Willamette Drive. The project includes a number of elements of constructing wide sidewalks and bicycle lanes that are separated from each other as well as from the roadway. And that's to promote safety for all the different users. The project also includes some other improvements of removing and installing new removing signals and installing flashing beacons to facilitate pedestrian movements. The project has gone through a number of iterations. There has been some scope changes, if you will, to correspond with budget constraints. The project limits, as seen in this slide, is Merrillhurst to Hidden Springs. However, based on the budget of $7 million you see in the slide, the improvements are focused at Oregon or Hidden Springs to Cedar Oaks, and that will include sidewalks and bike lane on both sides of the highway and between those streets. The other major improvements is at Merrillhurst and or 43, where there will be signal improvements in that area. You can see that at this point, we're at what's called DAP, Design Acceptance Package, and it's about 30% through design. Mars Smith is a consultant working with us, and the anticipated completion of the design phase of this project will be about a year from now in October, and construction is anticipated to start in the spring of 2023. I gotta say, I've been working with Lance Calvert, and he's been very passionate about this project. Mayor Walter, you think you'd want to know that you've got someone who's committed, as well as ODOT. And we've had multiple meetings and strategizing about different elements of this project. Jen Bachman is the project manager from ODOT, and we've also worked closely with ODOT staff, or excuse me, Metro staff, and really honing in on what are the particulars of this project. How do we want to make sure the money can cover as much as we can, the different elements of improving safety, promoting a multimodal facility in this area for the benefit of everyone. So It's been a pretty involved project. We look forward to continuing on to the completion of this project a year from now in terms of the design, and then of course having the design actually be executed in terms of construction in 2023. Those are some of the big elements or aspects of the project. I'm more than happy to answer any questions on the project.
And I think we have one more slide, Paul, I think that has just a view of it. So maybe Nick can go there.
Oh,
There's
yes, that,
yep.
Thanks. That's a good slide. So top left shows example of protected intersection. This is something new. There's two sort of, I guess, lanes or areas, one for pedestrians, one for bicyclists, and it's on all four corners of the intersection. It's to create separation, which promotes safety between the different users. The bottom or the right slide shows what I was trying to explain with bicycle lanes having its own lane and pedestrian having a different lane. This picture shows some, I guess, difference in treatment. Sometimes colors or materials can highlight the surface or the distinction between who uses what area of that facility. And again, you also see in this slide the separation from the roadway, which is an added feature to promote safety.
Great. Well, thanks, Paul. And like I mentioned, ultimately there is the concept plan calls for that continuous down to Highway 43 and where Willamette Drive and 205 come together. So as we mentioned earlier, that will pull Ped's bike down to that location, as well as the work on the other side of the river in Oregon City, which will bring us to our conversation on Thursday on linking those bike and ped facilities across the rivers. So we'll get more on that. But before we move on, any questions for Paul on the Oregon 43 project? All right. Well, Paul gets the benefit of being last. We're wearing people out here as we get later into the evening. But Paul, appreciate you taking the time on that. And maybe I'll just stop. We got about two more slides. But is there any questions while we have ODOT staff here tonight? We won't have the whole complement on Thursday night. I think Sandra will be joining us, but if you have questions on tolling or the I-205 project, it'd be great to get any more of those out tonight. Otherwise, we'll wrap up with about two more slides. Any final questions of ODOT tonight from either commissioner or council? All right, well, seeing none, we'll move on here to the next slide.
I have one, sorry.
Oh, there we go, Councilor Baumgartner.
I'm sorry, I just put my personal hand up, not my little cartoon hand. I just wanted to ask if someone would tackle the question that I thought I heard from Commissioner Mari about how exactly the work on I-205 is a benefit to the climate. The climate issues that we're having.
Oh, sure. I'll take that. I'm sorry. Number one, well, there's probably a few things. And the first would be that there's no stop and go. So that non-stop and go traffic actually helps with the GHG. And also the progression. So when we're thinking of congestion, we're not just stop and go, we're talking about stop, and everybody is still idling as you go through. So with all electronic tolling, number one, we're not putting up toll booths. So there's no place to stop to pay your toll and you can just continue on. So we believe that that does help address climate. Yes, we're reducing it. We're not eradicating it, but we are not contributing more to it.
Thank you. I get a lot of questions about that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go to the next slide. I think Ryan had to go pick up his child's from soccer. Ryan, are you back?
I don't think so. I can cover this slide.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Sure. So I actually have been involved with this conversation. I think I spoke with Dana and Kristen back in April when it was brought up about ODOT partnering with Oregon City and for the celebration of the 100-year historic arch bridge. We are very committed to partnering. Kelly Ball, our community affairs manager, has been in conversation with Kristen, which is what city's community communications coordinator. And there was a meeting that was held over summer. I wasn't part of the meeting, I think, due to conflicts, but the commitment was to, of course, continue to have conversations and certainly kind of come up with different ideas how we could really commemorate this historic and unique bridge, and then to continue conversation and convene in the fall, if you will, to determine further plans, how that would happen. And it appears the anniversary is at the end of 2022. So don't have a lot of details in terms of, I wasn't part of those meetings, of what will happen, but you have our, I guess, commitment that we will continue to work with Kristen and city of, I'm drawing the blank, but we'll work with the city to make sure this goes off as well as it can. And so Ryan is part of those, has been part of the conversation. We've discussed it with him and he's on board. And so with Oregon City and us and everyone else who's involved in planning and being part of celebration, hopefully it will be a huge success.
Commissioner Smith.
I'm super excited about this, and I probably the one that brought it up originally as a reminder. So I would love to be a part of that conversation. I'll talk to city staff about that, but I want to share with you all, I believe you would probably all appreciate this. I purchased this. This is the Oregon City Westland Bridge invitation for the grand opening of the Arch Bridge in 1922. It's an amazing booklet that shows all of the city officials, all of the photographs of the construction of the original bridge, and it is amazing. So I wanted to share that with you, and maybe it'll be an inspiration for us. I found that it is a little, Oregon City and Westland have a little competition with each other occasionally, and I was looking at this and I thought that it was tainted one way or the other, and I realized, well, it was published by the Oregon City Enterprise Courier. But what's interesting is there's a page here of Oregon City's history a little bit and a page of Westland. And so it has a really cool history in here. So maybe I'll get a photocopies of this to people so you can see it, but it's pretty cool. And I'll sure share it at the event.
Thanks, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to let Rocky hog all the credit because he and I both have been talking about this since last year. And I also have I actually have a personal connection. The person that originally owned my house was one of the chair people of this particular celebration in 1922. And so I was very excited to find out that information. And I've been talking to the city and of course, along with Rocky and the Downtown Oregon City Association and we're going to get the elevator involved in this since, when you come across on our side, it leads to the elevator, and then come across on the Westland side, it leads to the old historic city hall. So there's a multitude of opportunities, and I actually pulled out of my sorting a copy of the publication that was put together by Pamplin of the celebration that we had in 2012. So we have lots of good resources, and I have the opportunity to partner with Rocky on this project. I would love to do that as well. So
Right.
I'm very excited about it, just like Rocky is.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Commissioner Smith and McGriff, and I'm sure there'll be others that will volunteer as we move here over the course of the next year to the anniversary date. With that, let's move 2 slides forward to our last slide. And just for those counting, we've made it through 76 slides tonight fairly efficiently. So just a reminder, on Thursday, we'll be focusing on the Oregon City Westland Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Concept Plan and working through that. And we can switch off of the presentation, but most of you should have received this. I know with COVID, sometimes the hard copies don't get there, but if you haven't, either have the hard copy or the electronic copy, reach out to Dana at Oregon City or Eric at Westland, and they can get that to you beforehand if you haven't had it. But we'll be moving through that document and giving an overview on Thursday evening. And those 2 also have tonight's presentation, and we'll either they'll get it out or through your city managers, we'll get out the slide deck from this evening. So you have those for reference. With that, I think, let's see, Councilor Jones looks like he has a hand up. So I'll leave the floor to Councilor Jones.
Mark, thank you. And thank you for your facilitation tonight. I just want to beg the forgiveness of everyone that Thursday night, I coach a cross-country team and we have a home meet on Thursday. So I will be late to the meeting, but I'll arrive as quick as I can. My apologies ahead of time for arriving late. Thanks.
Great. All right, I'll turn it back over to our mayors to close us out for the evening. So I think tonight, Mayor Lyle Smith is our chair, and then we'll switch to Mayor Walters on Thursday. So Mayor Lyle Smith, do you want to close us out?
Sure. Any final comments from Mayor Walters before I adjourn?
Just a quick thank you to everybody. I know this was a tremendous amount of work, so we're very grateful for the time you've taken to present this to us. And thank you, Mayor Lyle Smith, for leading the meeting. I appreciate it.
I'm glad. Hopefully I could give you a little bit of a break for tonight, and we will see you all back on Thursday to pick up where we're leaving off. So for now, this meeting's adjourned. Thanks all.